Well, hi there, and welcome, language enthusiasts, into the exciting world of binomials. I'm your host, Nas, CELTA certified professional tutor with 12 years of international experience. And today we're going to talk about binomials. Have you ever heard phrases like by and large or odds and ends? And have you been confused about them? Are you unsure what they mean? Well, in today's video, you are about to find out exactly what 20 binomials mean. Not only are you going to find out what they mean, but I will expose you to a number of examples to help solidify their meanings. Let's start out with the first question. What are binomials? Binomials are linguistic constructs that consist of two words joined by a conjunction. Examples of conjunctions: and, or. Now, these pairs of words create expressions with meanings that go beyond the sum of their individual parts. Yes, very similar to idioms, adding depth, nuance, and color to our language. So the words don't mean exactly what they say. The expressions, the meanings go beyond the sum of the individual words. Now, you are about to invest a good portion of your life, maybe even 15 to 20 minutes in this video. So the question you should be asking is why? Why do you need to know about binomials? And the answer is really simple. Whether you like it or not, they are everywhere. Whether you're reading a book, watching a movie, or having a conversation with a friend, binomials are an integral part of everyday communication. So, how does this help you? Well, by understanding and mastering these expressions, you'll be able to express yourself more effectively. You will add flair to your writing and speech, and above all, you will be able to comprehend the nuances of the English language. Now, I know many of you are ESL students. You are studying English as a second language, and your focus is on advanced vocabulary. Then you progress to idioms because you understand the importance of idioms. But I would say that binomials are, by and large, underestimated and even ignored. So, I would like you to think of binomials as the spice that enhances your language. Binomials inject vitality and personality into your words. They allow you to convey complex ideas with elegance. So, from safe and sound to thick and thin, binomials offer a treasure trove of expressions. And we are now going to delve into 20 binomials. Are you ready? But first, I'd like to start with a reading which highlights the usage of binomials. And through the reading, you will understand and concede that binomials are all around us. So let's talk about a day in the life of a musician. Once upon a time, in a bustling city, there lived a talented musician named Emily. Every morning, Emily woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. She cherished the peace and quiet of the early hours before the day's hustle and bustle began. After enjoying a hearty breakfast of eggs and toast, Emily headed to her home studio to start the day's work. Her studio was filled with all sorts of musical instruments: guitars, keyboards, drums, and more, odds and ends. It was her sanctuary where she could let her creativity flow freely. As Emily sat down at her keyboard, she began to work on a new rock and roll song. The melody came to her easily, and soon she was lost in the music, tapping her foot to the beat. She was determined to make the song a hit, knowing that it could be the make or break moment for her music career. After several hours of intense concentration, Emily decided to take a break. She grabbed a sandwich and headed out to the park for some peace and quiet. As she sat on a bench enjoying the sunshine and fresh air, she couldn't help but think about the pros and cons of being a musician. Emily and her parents went back and forth about this all the time. She was often down and out and had to borrow money. By and large, being a musician was not easy, but she was willing to work day and night to make her dreams come true. She knew the ins and outs of the music industry, and last but not least, rock and roll was her life. She couldn't imagine being stuck behind a desk all day. I hope that you are still with me because now we are going to dive deep into 20 binomials. And believe me, this session is going to be a game changer when it comes to your language journey. Let's start with alive and kicking. And this means to be full of energy and vitality. So, still active or functioning. Let's look at some examples. Despite his age, John is still alive and kicking. So when we say despite his age, John is probably old. So, despite his age, my grandfather, who is 104 years old, is still alive and kicking. After the surgery, the patient was alive and kicking. So the patient was full of energy, vitality. Obviously, the patient recovered really well, alive and kicking. So if someone asks you a question like, how's your grandfather? Oh, he's alive and kicking. He's full of energy and vitality. He works in his garden all morning. He's alive and kicking. Bitter and sweet. Now, something I want to mention here is that in modern language, bittersweet is more common. Bittersweet is a compound adjective and it's formed by combining the words bitter and sweet. But technically, in terms of binomials, it's bitter and sweet. And what does bitter and sweet or bittersweet mean? It means combining elements of pleasure and pain, happiness and sadness, good and bad, the contrast, right? So, graduation day was bitter and sweet for Sarah. Pleasure and pain, happiness and sadness. I want you to pause for a moment and think of the reasons why graduation day would have been bitter and sweet for Sarah. It would have been sweet because she graduated. Excellent. So there was pleasure, there was happiness. What do you think the pain or the sadness could have been? What was the bitter part? Yeah, maybe her parents were not around to witness her graduation. Maybe they had passed away. So that would have been a bitter sweet moment. And the ending of the movie was both bitter and sweet. Bitter, sweet. So there was an element of happiness, but there was also an element of sadness. Would you say that the ending of Titanic was bitter and sweet? Some people died, but some people survived. So there was an element of pleasure, pain, happiness, sadness. Can you think of other examples? Please join our community and comment below. Moving on to the next one, which is back and forth, means moving repeatedly in one direction and then the opposite. So if you look at a clock, especially those old grandfather clocks, the pendulum swings back and forth, back and forth. We also use back and forth when we argue, back and forth. They argued back and forth for hours. In one direction, the opposite direction, an argument often goes like a pendulum, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Great. Now let's move on to the next, which is by and large. This is a lovely phrase and it's used all the time. What does it mean? Generally speaking, or on the whole? By and large. By and large, the project was a success. The trip was, by and large, enjoyable. Generally speaking, on the whole, the trip was, generally speaking, enjoyable. The trip was, by and large, enjoyable. This video is, by and large, informative. Let me know. Like and subscribe. Comment below. Now let's get legal. Cease and desist. It means to stop or discontinue an action or behavior. So an example would be the company received a cease and desist order from the court. And I would like you to remember cease and desist with the word order because it often goes together. Cease and desist order. It's usually a legal document. So the company received a cease and desist order from the court. Or the landlord issued a cease and desist notice to the noisy tenant. Have you ever had to issue a cease and desist order? Do you have noisy neighbors? Or maybe someone has issued a cease and desist order against you. Have you ever received a cease and desist order? I hope not. Now let's look at cut and dry. And this expression first appeared in the mid 17th century. So that would have been the 1600s. And it was cut and dried. And to be honest, that's the way I use it. So obviously, I'm really old fashioned. I'm mid 17th century. But the other version, cut and dry, was also used early on. And to be honest, it's not incorrect. Personally, I use cut and dried. But what does it mean? It means clearly and simply defined, straightforward. So the instructions were cut and dried or were cut and dry, making it easy to follow. And if something is not cut and dried, it's not straightforward. So the rules of the game were cut and dried. And when it comes to maybe some kinds of games or some kinds of sports that you don't understand and the rules are not straightforward, then they are not cut and dried. Have you ever read instructions that were not cut and dried? And what did you do when the instructions were not cut and dried? To be honest, when instructions are not cut and dried, I go to YouTube and look for a video on how to do it. Now let's move on to day and night. I'm pretty sure you've heard this one before. It's used very often. So what does day and night mean? Continuously. Excellent. Throughout the entire day and night. So the factory operates day and night to meet demand. McDonald's is open day and night. She worked day and night to finish the project on time. Day and night continuously, and the emphasis is throughout the entire day and night. Next up, down and out. That means lacking money or resources. So, in a state of poverty or maybe even misfortune. So, can you think of examples of when a person may be down and out? When would they be lacking money? When would they be lacking resources? When would they be in a state of poverty or misfortune? Yes, when a person loses his job. Yeah, absolutely. No money. And that leads to a state of poverty or misfortune. So after losing his job, he was down and out. And in our reading, I said that Emily was often down and out. She didn't have money. She had to borrow money. And the family living in the shelter was down and out. Sometimes refugees are down and out. They lack money, they lack resources, they are living in a state of poverty. I hope and I pray that you are never down and out. Now let's move on to fair and square. What does it mean? In an honest and just manner without cheating or deception. And we often use this when we're playing games. They won the game fair and square. They won the game fair and square. They won the game in an honest manner. They didn't cheat. And the judge awarded custody of the children fair and square in an honest manner, in a just manner, no deception, very honest, fair and square. I have used fair and square throughout my childhood when playing games like Monopoly or Cluedo. I would often say, hey, I won, fair and square. Now, let's move on to the next binomial. But if you are enjoying this video, if these phrases are really impressing you and helping you, please like and subscribe. This is an advanced edition. Now, let's talk about first and foremost. And this means above all, primarily, most importantly, first and foremost, I want to draw the person's attention to what is most important. First and foremost, we need to ensure everyone's safety. That is the primary objective. That is what's most important. First and foremost, we need to ensure everyone's safety. Another good example, the health of our employees is first and foremost. Are you ready for the next one, which is high and dry? And this means to be abandoned or stranded or left without assistance. The shipwrecked crew was left high and dry on the deserted island. So the crew were abandoned, they were stranded, they did not have any assistance. And the second one, I would prefer to change this slightly and say that after the storm, instead of saying many houses were left high and dry, I'd prefer to say many homeowners were left high and dry. So there was a storm and the houses were destroyed and the homeowners were actually left high and dry. They were stranded, they were left without assistance. For me, that just sounds more natural. What are your thoughts? Now, let's look at ins and outs. Ins and outs, the intricacies or the details, the inner workings of something. So he knows all the ins and outs of the business. That means he knows all the details. He knows all the inner workings. And understanding the ins and outs of the legal system can be complex, absolutely. But it's important that a lawyer knows the ins and outs of the legal system. Do you agree? If you do, please comment below and please like and subscribe. Now, let's personalize this. When it comes to your job and your career, do you know the ins and outs of your profession? This is an interesting one, isn't it? Kit and caboodle, kit and caboodle. It means everything, the whole thing, all inclusive. She packed up the entire kit and caboodle. They bought the house, kit and caboodle. It's not a very common phrase, but it's so cute that I just could not leave it out. You may have noticed by now that I'm really passionate about English. It's not just being a native speaker or CELTA certified or having 12 years of international experience. No. I love languages. I think that they have such charm and their own kind of personality. And honestly, binomials are that way. Kit and caboodle, it's just so charming. And I feel exactly the same way when I'm studying Italian. I love phrases that are unique and have some kind of spice in them. So, kit and caboodle. They bought the house, kit and caboodle, the whole thing, all inclusive, furniture, everything together. Last but not least, and I'm pretty sure that if you are an advanced student, you have heard this one before. And last but not least means the final person or thing to be mentioned, but equally important. So, last but not least, this is important. It may be last, but it's still very important. So, the final person or thing to be mentioned, but it's equally important. Last but not least, I want to thank our sponsors. We need to review the financials and last but not least, the marketing plan. So we will review the financials first and then the marketing plan last. But I want to make it very clear that the marketing plan is equally important. Last but not least, law and order. You've probably watched the movie. What does it mean, law and order? The maintenance of peace and security, typically by a governing body. The police department is responsible for upholding law and order. The mayor campaigned on a platform of restoring law and order. So, what does this one mean? That means that when the mayor campaigned for election or re election, his platform, his message was that he would restore law and order. Basically, that was his selling point. That is what he used to convince the voters to vote for him. Make or break. Determine success or failure. It's critically important. So, this project will make or break our company. The final exam is make or break for my GPA. It will determine the success or failure, make or break. And it's a very common phrase. Odds and ends, very, very common. I've used it many times. Miscellaneous items or leftover pieces. Very, very simple. Go into your kitchen drawer where you have your spatulas and your whisks and all kinds of things, and you will find lots of odds and ends. Miscellaneous items, leftover pieces. You know that set of three measuring cups? Well, you've just got one left. So your drawer is full of odds and ends. Let's be honest, everyone has a cupboard or a drawer in their house that's filled with odds and ends, miscellaneous items, leftover pieces. We really should give them away. Let's look at some examples. The garage sale included odds and ends from around the house. After moving, we had a box of odds and ends, and we didn't know where to put these odds and ends. It's a great idea if you want to become a minimalist to have a box somewhere in your home and you toss in all your odds and ends, and at the end of the month, you close it up and you give it to charity because let's be honest, we don't need these odds and ends. They are miscellaneous items, they are leftover pieces. Dare I say that sometimes they are just junk? What are your thoughts? Comment below. Now it's time for peace and quiet. And in a few minutes, this video will end and then you'll have some peace and quiet. What does that mean? Calm and tranquility. No noise, no disturbances. So she enjoys sitting in the garden for some peace and quiet. The vacation cabin in the middle of the forest offered peace and quiet away from the city. Where do you go when you want peace and quiet? And if you live in a home with lots of people, it's not always easy to find peace and quiet. So, do you go down to the park? Do you go for a walk? Where do you go when you want peace and quiet? Do you go into your bedroom and lock the door? I'd love to know. Please comment. Now, I'm pretty sure you've heard pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages, upsides and downsides, positive and negative aspects. So before making a decision, consider the pros and cons. So, weighing the pros and cons of each option is essential. Are you somebody who considers the pros and cons before you make a decision? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but it's really a smart idea. It's an intelligent way to make a decision. First, weigh the pros and cons. Some people even write up a list of the pros and the cons, the upsides and the downsides, and then they look at which side is stronger. Weighing the pros and cons. And this is another thing, we weigh the pros and cons. Beautiful phrase. Consider the pros and cons. Evaluate the pros and cons. And now we're going to talk about rock and roll, energetic and lively, a style of music characterized by a strong beat and electric guitar. And if you enjoyed our video on 20 important binomials, please like and subscribe. We upload daily, and with 12 years of international experience, I feel like I know what learners need. Just follow us, and you'll never need an English course again. Yes, you will need courses where you can practice your speaking, but for content, for input, for information, this channel is designed or has been designed to cater to the needs of English learners. We have the B1, B2 series, which are easily identified in blue, and then we have the advanced series with red and yellow. So if you enjoyed this video, if you learned something in this video, tell us what it was in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for spending the last 27 minutes and 36 seconds with me. I'm your host, Nas. It is ciao for now.